Hey everyone, it's Deanna. Today, we're diving into a creepy crime story. Stick around for the chilling details. On October 19, 2012, police officers discovered the body of 21-year-old Whitney Heichel. It happened on the mountain of a forested area, located 40 minutes drive from her own home in the city of Gresham, Oregon, USA. The girl disappeared on October 16th. She was last seen alive by her husband as she left their home at 6:45 a.m. She kissed him goodbye and left for work at 7 a.m. Her husband continued packing for work and later left the house. Whitney worked as a barista at a Starbucks near her home and was on her way to work, but she never showed up for work. Her husband, Clint Heichel, became concerned when work called to find out where Whitney was and if she was okay. Coworkers suggested that the girl probably did not feel well, was sick, and stayed home, but her husband rejected this version. Whitney had been in great shape and spirits since the morning, so her absence from work seemed very strange. Whitney had never been late for work before, and not showing up at all was not something she could do. It was out of character. The employees of the coffee shop, as well as the husband himself, could not get in touch with the girl. The husband immediately realized that something was wrong. Around 10 a.m. that same day, the spouse contacted the police. That same day, detectives discovered that the girl's bank card had been used at a nearby gas station just hours after her disappearance. Her 1999 black Ford Explorer was also spotted in the Walmart parking lot. But what could have happened to the girl? Whitney was hardworking, kind, beautiful, and very religious. She attended her local church regularly. Whitney had wonderful relationships at work with her family, friends, and neighbors. At the time of her disappearance, she had been married to Clint for 9 months and was in a happy relationship. Those closest to her thought they had the perfect relationship. They understood each other literally on the half word, and the couple was planning to have children in the near future. Whitney herself grew up in a large family with 6 siblings and strived to create an equally large, happy family. She stood out among her siblings for her determination and kindness. Unfortunately, her dreams of children and a family home were not to be realized. Despite excellent family relations, the husband became the prime suspect in the case. As it usually happens, it was a shock for him, but he understood that this was a normal phenomenon and decided to cooperate with the investigation, especially since he wanted to find his beloved wife as soon as possible. The man turned out to be the last person to see his wife alive at the time. This was suspicious because she had disappeared after leaving the house and not making it to work. Clune was very upset about his wife's disappearance and did everything he could. He actively cooperated with the investigation, handing out flyers and participating in the search. Clint Heichel gave detectives all the information they needed and allowed them to search the house. Despite the suspicion, nothing could be found to confirm the husband's guilt. A search of the house turned up nothing, and there was no motive. Clint gave the impression of a genuinely loving couple, and those close to the family refused to believe that a loving husband like Clint could have done anything to Whitney. Many locals were against the accusations that might have been made against Clint. Everyone supported the man. The case caused a great public outcry. In one of the interviews Clint gave to the local media, he smiled while talking about his wife's disappearance, which made investigators suspicious. However, many wrote this reaction off as a nervous smile and believed that the man was out of his mind with concern for his wife. The police checked Clint out thoroughly, but he had a solid alibi. He left the house right after his wife left. There was also information that the girl's car had been seen near a Walmart on the other edge of Gresham. According to witnesses, a man was driving the car and Clint was already at work. The owner of the car was in the passenger seat. However, the witness could not describe the man who was driving and could not determine what condition the girl was in. He had only seen a glimpse of the couple on his way to the store. Whitney's car was indeed found in the parking lot of a convenience store. The car had broken glass on the passenger side of the door. There were signs of a struggle in the car and blood was found and sent to the lab for testing. The store's security cameras were far away and did not help us understand who was in the car. The only thing that could be determined from the camera footage was that the car was left there at 11 a.m. There were no other witnesses who could have seen the car. Police used the information about the man in the car to try to find out who the missing girl might have been with. Whitney's wife's relatives denied that she had a lover. The brothers were at work at the time, and it turned out that none of the acquaintances could have been in the car with her that morning. The search for the missing person was actively conducted in the area where she disappeared, as well as in nearby forests and waters. Her cell phone could not be located as it was probably switched off. Literally the day after her disappearance, an important piece of evidence was found. On October 17, 2012, Whitney's cell phone was found in the bushes near a gas station, a short distance from the same Walmart store where her car was seen. A child discovered the phone and gave it to an adult. When police learned of this, the phone was examined. It turned out that the phone had been turned off all along, so detectives couldn't track its location. He had dozens of missed messages and calls from an upset spouse, and several calls from coworkers and other relatives. By then, detectives were certain that the husband was innocent. Investigators began to reconstruct the chain of events that would lead them to the girl. At this point, everyone who knew Whitney was hoping that she was alive and unharmed, but the police had no such hopes when they found blood on her car. It was a close-knit community, so neighbors and church members eagerly joined the search for the girl. Several search parties were organized and began to search the area near the addresses where she was last seen. The discovery of a mobile device expanded the search area. Meanwhile, the police analyzed the circumstances of the incident and the information available to them. At the time, it was not possible to identify the kidnapper from the cell phone records. The girl's card was used discreetly by the intruder. He could not be seen on the video surveillance. It looked like the missing woman was trying to discreetly use her cell phone to call for help. But the intruder noticed, snatched the communication device, and threw it in the bushes, where it was found, or forced the girl to get rid of the phone in front of him. The kidnapper had not contacted her or made any monetary demands, so it was not a ransom kidnapping. The longer the girl was not found, the greater the risk that she had been murdered. The police began interviewing residents of the apartment complex, the couple's neighbors. Some did not even know the girl was missing. Others said they hoped she was alive, unharmed, and would return soon. Nothing suspicious was found until police began communicating with one of the neighbors, Jonathan Holt. As it turned out, the man was very close to the couple. They helped and supported each other in a neighborly way. There was a time when Holt was even given the key to the Heichel's apartment to take care of the cat and flowers while the couple was away. Shortly before the incident, the head of the family, Clint Heichel, helped the neighbors start his motorcycle, just 2 weeks before the wife's disappearance. Jonathan Holt had been involved in the search for Whitney after her disappearance and had supported her worried husband. The longer the detective talked to Holt, the more nervous he became, and the more confused and confusing his answers became. The inconsistencies in his testimony became more vivid. The guy made up alibis on the fly. His first story was that he had been mugged that morning. It later turned out to be a completely fabricated event when the investigators asked him why he didn't go to the police. The second version of the alibi was also untrue. Detectives found that he was not at work that day. Jonathan Holt, who was 24 at the time of his neighbor's disappearance, seemed like a quiet young man. According to everyone who knew him, including the Heichel, he was a normal guy, friendly, and never caused problems. The man was married, and happily so. Police found no history of problems with illegal substances or law violations. Jonathan Holt did well in high school, graduating in 2006, 4 years after his junior year. He proposed to his longtime girlfriend, and she accepted. The couple lived in an apartment complex near the heroes of the tragic story for a while, then moved into the same house where the couple lived. This was just a few months before these horrific events. Holt's first interrogation took place on the evening of October 17, 2012. Police met with him a second time the next day. The man looked terribly depressed, seemingly racked with guilt. Finally, during interrogation, he broke down and confessed to Whitney's murder. Jonathan told the true story of that bloody morning. Surprisingly, at the beginning of the investigation, when Jonathan began to raise suspicions with the police, Whitney's husband was asked, could his neighbor, Jonathan, be involved in his wife's disappearance? Clint replied without hesitation that Holt could not have done such a thing. The truth, however, had no illusions. On the morning of October 16, a neighbor was waiting for Whitney outside the apartment. He asked her to drive him to work. They knew each other well, communicated closely, and trusted each other. Therefore, the girl did not feel threatened by him and did not refuse. Whitney liked to help everyone, even in some small things. It was pleasant for her. They got in the car and Whitney drove. After driving for about 5 minutes, the man pulled out a 9mm handgun and pointed it at his neighbor. He ordered her to drive to an area near Lake Roslyn. The girl was frightened and complied. After stopping at the designated location, Jonathan attacked and raped her at gunpoint. After raping her, he shot her when he realized that Whitney would turn him in to the police. The man discarded the gun, put the body in the trunk, and drove into a wooded area. He hid his victim in the brush and drove to the Walmart parking lot. Here, the intruder abandoned the car in an inconspicuous place, away from the video cameras. The blood in the car belonged to Whitney. He then returned home, threw away the blood-stained clothes, and washed himself thoroughly to get rid of the gunpowder residue on his hands and the bloodstains. Police believe the window was intentionally broken to confuse the investigation. Ample physical evidence was found in the car, including DNA from both the murdered woman and the killer. Whitney's body was found on October 19th. After the killer reported the crime and gave the location, she was mutilated with evidence of gunshot wounds, literally at point-blank range. In addition, there were visible signs of decomposition of the body, which complicated the work of the forensic experts. Law enforcement had a confession from the killer, hard evidence, his and the victim's DNA in the car. Jonathan's fingerprints on the gun used to shoot the girl and his DNA on the victim's body after the rape. It all corroborated Holt's story. The husband of the deceased was devastated by her loss and could not come to his senses for a long time. He couldn't believe that their family friend, a neighbor, could have raped and murdered his wife out of lust. Investigators gathered enough evidence to charge Jonathan Holt, who had already been arrested, with first-degree murder. The defendant willingly cooperated with the investigation and provided the police with all the information. It appeared that the neighbor was sincerely sorry for what he had done, and the sense of guilt would not let him go. He began to pour his soul out to law enforcement, even telling them that he had sexually explicit photos of children on his computer. The autopsy of Whitney's body showed that the girl died of gunshot wounds. The intruder shot her 4 times in the head. According to specialists, she died instantly. At the trial, a recording of the defendant's testimony was used and all the evidence against him was shown. The lawyer insisted that the defendant was remorseful for what he had done and had confessed to the crime, so he deserved a reduced sentence. Jonathan apologized to the victim's family and friends for taking away his wife, sister, and daughter. The man in court explained his actions by saying that he had a secret love for Whitney, even though he was married. Every encounter, every look from the girl aroused his passion, but Whitney was cold and indifferent. At some point, he lost control and was especially angry when she rejected him and resisted the moment of rape. When he was given the floor at the trial, he summed up his testimony by saying that he deserved the love and the punishment that the court would give him. When the deceased's husband, Clint Heichel, spoke, he looked for a long time in silence at Jonathan, the man he trusted and helped, who took the meaning of life from him. He looked at the murderer of his wife and said, "Know this, I will see her again." The trial was attended by about 60 people, members of the family, and the congregation of the church the victim had left. The killer also appeared to have attended this religious community and was very devout. In front of these people, Hall pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, as well as kidnapping and rape, as the circumstances warranted. Family and church members expressed their deepest outrage at the actions of a member of the congregation. Words of support were spoken to the family of the murdered person, as well as to the murderer's wife, who was also shocked by what had happened and suffered undeservedly from her husband's crime. The defendant sat in the courtroom with his head bowed and a guilty look on his face for most of the time. When the family of the murdered woman spoke of how his actions had affected them, he began to cry, but he truly sobbed when her husband, Clint, spoke. 3 times he tried to raise his eyes to him, but each time he lowered them, unable to bear the gaze of the man from whom he had taken the love of his life. On July 8, 2013, Jonathan was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The weekend after the trial, the convicted man was transported to the Multnomah County Detention Center. The first time he was closely supervised because he was found to be prone to voluntary withdrawal from life. The goal of the supervision in his case was to prevent Jonathan from committing suicide. Thanks for joining today's crime journey. I'm Diana, your guide in the shadows. Subscribe, hit the bell, and let's keep exploring mysteries together. Stay curious, stay alert, and see you next time. Take care.